Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the INFOWARS Nightly News. I'm your host, John Bound, on this Friday, the 13th of April, 2012. Tonight on the INFOWARS Nightly News, the Ring of Fire is beginning to bare its teeth. Are we prepared to face another Fukushima? Then, our Agenda 21 coverage continues. Darren McBreen reports from a citywide cover-up in Roswell, Georgia. Plus, we speak with Lloyd Chapman about the latest GSA scandal. And Joseph Plummer, author of Dishonest Money, joins us to discuss the private Federal Reserve. Tonight on the INFOWARS Nightly News. And let's get into the news. A story coming from a fellow we're going to interview here in a few moments, Mr. Lloyd Chapman. A story he submitted to the Huffington Post. GSA scandal is a window to the way Washington really works. And this, of course, has been going on forever. He says, as early as 2003, the GAO released an investigation finding that millions of dollars earmarked for small businesses were diverted to the largest companies in the world. Today, as you're reading this, millions of dollars that should by law be awarded to small businesses are being diverted to the largest companies in the world. And of course, this is carried by the most recent scandal, from the New York Times, lost in the GSA scandal, confusion about a small business contract. And according to a report issued last week by the GSA's Inspector General, the GSA awarded a $58,808 contract to a company called Royal Productions for audiovisual services. Government rules say that contracts in this dollar amount are reserved exclusively for small business concerns, the report said, but Royal Productions is not a small business for purposes of this type of contract. Moreover, it forwarded a price quote from a competitor to Royal, enabling it to present a winning bid. According to the Inspector General, this too is against the rules. And on we go as more money is spent on sushi and dinners and Palm Springs vacations for interns. In order to make this all make sense to the American people, if they happen to find out where all of our taxpayer money is going, they held awards for themselves, which they dubbed the Jackass Award, pretty fittingly. Officials at the General Service Administration invented fake awards as an excuse to hold taxpayer-funded dinner events at conferences, according to an interview transcript obtained by Roll Call. Describing the award ceremonies as a running joke, the employee said supervisors explained that the fake awards were designed to justify dinner events at the conferences. And with more on that, we go to Lloyd Chapman, who has worked to protect the interests of our nation's 27 million small businesses. In 2002, Mr. Chapman founded the American Small Business League, and that, of course, with a goal of stopping the diversion of federal small business contracts to large corporations. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Chapman.
Thanks for having me.
And, of course, we are going to start this interview with yet again, another story about GSA and government bureaucracy mishandling funds. And if we go back to April 10th, the scandal began. And as you said earlier when we were chatting, that if it had not been for the video, no one would have heard about this, and it'll probably last 5 minutes, and people will go about their way and forget all about it. But we're talking about a scandal that cost us, well, in the millions. They used award dinners to justify the money they were spending. They spent money on interns. They spent $136,000 on scouts to go and find the area to have the party. How typical is this?
This goes on every day, all day long. This is just a little sample of how our government runs. And again, had it not been for those compelling videos, the guy doing the rap song and the award shows, whatever, had it not been for that, you would have never heard about this. But for every story like this that you hear about, there's 100 that you never hear about. And quite frankly, the volume of money that they squandered, it sounds like a lot, it's a lot, but there are agencies that are squandering 100 times that much on a daily basis, but you don't hear about those stories because there's not that compelling, video. Also, you have to realize the federal government has a lot of power to squelch stories that they don't want to get out. And if they don't want a story to get out, they can just do a lot of things to make sure that it doesn't get out.
Sure, or turn the facts into a light where they look like they are investigating it when in fact they're not at all. In relation to the amount of money spent, let's go to a major level. You were speaking earlier about the story about the $12 billion that was lost in Iraq that was brought over. Just as an example for folks, tell us about that story and explain how that rolls downhill to the bureaucracy in America.
Well, when they started rebuilding Iraq, a C-17 transport flew to Iraq with $12 billion in cash in $100 bills, shrink wrapped in $100,000, they call them bricks, about a foot square. $12 billion in cash. They lost $9 billion. Lost it. Don't know what happened to it. There was a little Mickey Mouse congressional hearing and swept it under the rug. So when you think about, the kind of money on the GSA scandal, think about $9 billion in cash disappears, and there's a little brief hearing. In fact, I bet most people hadn't even heard that story. That's kind of funny. So if you're watching this right now, have you heard the story about the $9 billion in cash that disappeared? Google it, and you can read about it. But that's a story that didn't get much attention, and that should have been on the front page of Time magazine. But so many news organizations depend upon these feeds from the federal government for news that the government can sort of, threaten to cut off those news feeds if they run stories that they don't like. But it's very common for the government to hire some of the biggest public relations firms in the world to help them control the stories that come out. In fact, the GSA, I take it back, the GAO did an investigation a few years ago and found they were spending something like $1 million a day on public relations firms to control these stories. So the abuses in government are just rampant. The GSA story, those happen every single day, and we just don't hear about them.
Yeah, and the American mindset goes to sleep on it. We just had the report up on screen. I mean, there is no bigger headline than that. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you have a headline like that, heads were going to roll. But now, we dispute the report and just going about your business. This won't be in the paper tomorrow.
That's right.
It sure was shocking, but here's a fabricated story we can go to. You're also speaking about how I asked you how the amount of time you're speaking about the request for records, how the
Information Act.
how the common person can go about doing what you're doing, and I asked you how long it took to actually get some information. What was the longest time? And it was pretty surprising.
Yeah, they're supposed to respond within 30 days, but if you ask for damaging information that shows fraud like I do, you're looking at up to 3 years. And again, I've gone to the Supreme Court to get the phone records for the SBA's press office director, Mike Stamler, and those are very simple records. They should be able to email that to you in 10 minutes. And I was at the Supreme Court. I spent, thousands and thousands of dollars, but I can tell when I've uncovered something that's very damaging based upon how hard they fight to withhold it. And I think these phone records for the SBA press office director would show that the SBA was working with some of the biggest public relations firms in the world to kill these stories about the diversion of federal small business contracts to corporate giants around the world. In fact, we found information that the SBA had hired an international public relations firm that specializes in crisis management to try to kill these stories. I got the documents in my office. But they should respond in 30 days, and people should make use of this. You can type up a letter and just say, under the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act, please provide the following information. And you can get anything that you want to. So more people should do that.
Is there a cap on the amount of time that they have to get that information to you?
They're supposed to give it to you in 30 days, but they can ask for an extension. But generally speaking, you should get this information within about 90 days. But I think if more people used it, it would increase transparency in government. And it's just real simple. Just get a piece of paper, type up a letter. And again, the wording is, under the provisions of the Freedom of Information Act, please provide me with the following documents. By the way, you have to ask for documents. You can't ask them for information. It has to be documents. And just figure out what documents that you want, and they've got to give it to you.
Well, speaking of the GSA, it's basically a part of the administration that's behind the scenes, does a lot of the mundane, routine work, but they feel that they deserve this kind of vacation spent by the taxpayers. The amount of money spent could have gone to all of these things throughout America that could have done us a lot of good, especially with the economy and the people being out of work and creating jobs and everything that Obama gets up on his pulpit and professes about. And it's just obvious lies to all of us that are awake. And it's shameful. And is there any way, I mean, there are folks like you out there fighting day in, day out to change the system. Is there a larger scale way for us to get things done through the court systems, through the Supreme Court? Could we completely overhaul an administration of this scale?
We could, if people would just stand up and quit being afraid of the government. Here's what I'd like to suggest to everyone watching this. Get out your computer and Google Thomas Jefferson's quotes and read what Thomas Jefferson said. He is probably one of the principal founding fathers of this country. And he said, every generation needs a new revolution. He said, when the people fear the government, you have tyranny.
And the tree of liberty will be fed by the blood of tyrants.
That's right.
Or something along those lines. The tree of liberty
needs to be watered from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants.
Yes.
So when you read what he says, he'd be arrested for treason today, I think.
Sure.
And if I said those things, they'd be knocking on my door. But read Thomas Jefferson's quotes. And people need to be quit being afraid of the government. And we need to do what Thomas Jefferson said and make them afraid of us.
Well, yeah, people need to stop being afraid of the government, because pretty soon they're going to be really afraid of the government, because that's what the government wants. They want you to be afraid. And every day we come into work here, the stories get more and more intense about the government and the overreach that's going on throughout this country and around the world, and the audacity of the overreach. And people that are paying attention are, at this point, we're just waiting. It seems like next week things are going to really change. People need to wake up. But the good thing is that we have, here at INFOWARS, we have somewhere between 15 and 20 million listeners a week now, and it's growing. And then you have the mainstream media losing all kinds of viewers because people are hungry for the truth. You've got MSNBC fabricating the Zimmerman case in order to make a race war happen. You know, and in my opinion, a race war is not going to happen. Racism, sure, it's in small pockets of this country, but it's over, folks. You know, give up on the whole racism thing. That thing ended 30, 40 years ago, but